This week on In Post, answering one of your questions about hue versus saturation. Hi everyone, I'm Scott Davenport and thanks for joining me this week on In Post. Today, it's a Q&A session. I got asked a question by Maria, what's the difference between hue and saturation? And I thought this would make a really good topic for one of these videos. I'll give you the Scott's Cliff Notes version, and then we'll get over to the computer and elaborate on this. Hue is another word for color. Think the rainbow. You go from red, like we learned in grammar school, red, orange, yellow, all the way up to the purple end of the range. Saturation is how much gray is in that tone. If you have lots of gray, you have a desaturated color and it's going to be black and white. If you have no gray at all, it'll be the purest representation of that color. So that's really the nickel tour. But let me illustrate this using a tool in Lightroom that I think can really drive this home. I'll use the split toning pane to show the difference between hue and saturation. I'll open up the color selection for the highlights, and we're going to focus our attention on this portion of the screen right now. And in particular, this half of this rectangle, the right half side, which is going to show what I have selected as my current hue and saturation. Let's start with hue. So here's my hue slider, and let me pick something that we can see much better in our color swatch, so this nice red. So hue is another word for color. As I change the hue, I'm clicking and dragging to the right, you'll see that that selection point is moving across the rainbow, right? Red, orange, yellow, and this rectangle here, my selected color, is changing as well. And that's what hue is. Hue is just a color from left to right, the rainbow we learned in grammar school. Now I'll just leave it here, and let's say this orange is a nice good tone. Now contrast that with saturation. Let me lower the saturation down. So right now the saturation's at 83%. And that's just a matter of where I clicked on this vertical axis. Saturation is how much gray is in the color I have selected. As I lower saturation, you're going to see that selection point lower all the way down to the bottom. And you can see I've removed all of the color by reducing the saturation to 0. As I raise saturation back up, if you're watching this rectangle here, you're going to see more and more of that orange tone show up until I go all the way to the top, which is the pure representation of that color. There's no more gray in that selection point, or there's no more gray in that tone. It's all the hue, the color that I've selected. So that's it. Hue is color, and saturation is how much of that color do you have? How much gray do you have in that tone, or how much pure color do you have? So now that we have a better understanding of hue and saturation, what can we do with these things? Again, I'm going to use split toning just to illustrate what's going on first, and then I'll show you another example of a different photo. So here I have pure black on the left and various tones of gray all the way up to pure white on the right. I'll press the J key and we can see we've clipped, right? This is pure black, it's completely clipped, and pure white, completely clipped. Let me now start increasing saturation. I have the hue set at 0, and I'm looking at highlights, which means my brighter tones I will have take on a particular hue. As I increase saturation, you're going to see some red start to be introduced, right? And it's affecting just the highlighted areas. Now as I increase this all the way to the right, I'm getting more and more and more color, and down to the left I'm getting less. If I do the same thing, let's pick a different tone for shadows. I'll pick blue. You'll see the tones change accordingly, right? I'm getting more blue on this lower end of the spectrum because that's where my shadows are. And at the higher end, I'm getting less because I don't have that much shadow. So this is really, I guess, a good way to visualize and see what split toning is doing when you use it on a real image. So again, if I change the hue now, these are my highlights, reds. I can shift those colors and make them oranges, greens, all the way to purple. And I'm just changing the hue. I'm not changing how much of that color is there. Let's look a little more of a practical example for when you have an image and you want to alter or tweak the colors you have in it. So here's a scene of a forest, And I would like the tones of the mosses and the leaves to be more green. This is a bit of a classic example, at least in the world of landscape shooting. Let me open up the hue, saturation, and luminance pane in Lightroom. So for these greens of the mosses, looking at our hues, let's pay attention to hue right now. We can see that I can take aqua and send it toward green. I can take green and make it more green. I can take yellow and send it toward the green side. And this in particular is what most often works for landscape shots where you want more green. There's a fair amount of yellow tones in the foliage. If you push those more toward green, you get a more green result. So I'm going to grab this slider and start pushing. Actually, I'm going to push it all the way. Now you can really see that. That's, insanely green. But if I pull it back some, I can go the opposite way, insanely yellow. So if I push that, this way or so, I'm getting a much more, rich green tone. And that's by taking what is a yellow color and shifting its hue toward green. So anything that's yellow in the scene or has a yellowish tone to it, I'm biasing toward green. Now, if I play with saturation, now that I have a bunch of green tones, if I can take green and I can make it very saturated, increase the level of green. This is way over the top, but proves the point, right? Now, if I do the same thing with yellows, it's going to counteract a little bit what I've done because I want things to be more green here. But you can play with saturation and things like this. You've seen my videos. I use the On1 software. The green enhancer of the color enhancer in Perfect Effects. This is what it does. It takes the yellow channel, shifts it toward green, and increases some saturation. I haven't really talked about luminance, but luminance is just how bright the color is. So take the green here, and I can make the greens brighter or darker. I personally don't play too much with luminance, but it is there. It's something else you can do. Another thing to play with, just to drive this home, we have the water here. We can take the aquas and make those a little more blue. And so you're going to see that there'll be a softer, more bluish tone to the water. Again, I will push this all the way to the end. You can see the change, dulled versus brighter and crisper. Actually looks kind of nice. You can saturate it, add more, add less. And these are the types of things you can do with playing around with hue and saturation. So that is it. That is hue versus saturation. Maria, thanks a lot for your question. It was a really good one. And I hope that others found that very interesting as well. If you have a question, you can contact me through my website. It'd be great to hear from you. Let me know what you'd like to know more about, or if it's just to let me know you've enjoyed these shows, that helps keep me going for sure. You can tell a friend too. I'd love to see the viewership grow, and we can all become better photographers together. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.